Morning, everybody. Welcome to the first EE Community Meetup of 2022. I hope everyone's excited for the new year. I hope you guys have some big plans, made all your resolutions, and excited to be part of the community this year. As I think Expression Engine overall has seen a lot of growth, has seen a lot of growth as far as the product goes and the community. The forums are hopping again. We're seeing a lot of activity there. Slack is always going. Features coming out from the EE team. We've seen a lot of development there, and I think we have a strong baseline from 6 to 6.1. And now I think I'll talk about a little bit about the end about 6.2 and where we're at with that. So I'm excited for the new year, excited for new opportunities and all that's going to come with that. So just a few housekeeping items as we always have to do. First of all is our code of conduct. If you're not familiar with that, all of our EEConf events, we'd like to follow a code of conduct. You can find that at eeconf.com/code of conduct. Essentially what it means is be kind, right? We're a very welcoming community, welcoming of all people. And we want everybody to be kind. If you feel that somebody is not being kind or violating that, whether it's some kind of meeting that you're doing or you're in the chat or something and any kind of issues with that, then you can go to this page and report that violation, and EConf committee members will be notified of that immediately, and we'll address that as soon as possible. But that's super important. We're a community, and just like any community, you want everybody to respect each other and treat each other kindly. Everything you've already found your way, everything's going to be here in the sessions today. This one room, we're just going to stay in this one session all morning long. So we'll have Gavin, and then we'll hang out and chat afterwards. You can also find us in the EE Conference Slack channel. So if you go to the Expression Engine chat Slack and the EECMS Slack, and then go to the Expression or EEConf channel, we're going to be hanging out in there. You can always chat about EEConf events and stuff from those events there, whether it's during an event or year round. If you're not familiar with Slack, go to expressionengine.com and there's links to join the EECMS Slack. I'd say that right now, a majority of the community is on there. If you just want to chat, if you want to ask some quick questions of people about how to do stuff in Expression Engine or anything web related, business related, anything like that, that's where the community hangs out a lot. And throughout the day, you can chat with others. So. All right, quick agenda for today, 10:15 to around an hour here, 11:15. We've got Gavin presenting, and then we'll have Q&A after that. And then, unfortunately, I will say that Tom from the Expression Engine team is under the weather today. He's not feeling well, so we're not going to have that team update. So instead, you get more of me. So I'm going to chat a little bit about 6.2, but we won't have like a big update or anything like that from the team today. We'll forego that for next time. As always, pay attention to the EECMS blog and Twitter, all that kind of stuff. Of course, if you guys are new here, we love to have audio and video question and answers. So if at the end you want to share your audio and video and ask a question, that's the best way to ask a question. You just press that button up top, and then I will allow you into the room and you'll share your screen and ask your question. We can chat on there. That's also after the talk, after we're done here, just hanging out and saying hi to each other, meet and greet, especially if you're new. We'd love to meet you. That's how everybody can hang out afterwards. Avoid using the chat for questions. So if you have questions, if you're in this says stage, but it's actually session tab. And there's the Q&A button. Click on the Q&A and ask questions there. And that way people can thumbs up it so we know what's an important question. And I can moderate that as well. Go ahead, throughout the talk, just go ahead and put questions in there. And then we can come at the end and ask those, or I might interrupt Gavin if there's a moment and break and ask specific questions that are coming up or something like that. If you ask them in the chat, they get lost a lot. So we prefer you use that Q&A feature if you don't mind. If you don't know, as always, the committee behind EE Conference, So we got a great group of guys and gals here that help put on the conference. We work year round for these meetups, which we're hoping to maintain a schedule of every other month. We're also having a spring summit this year and the fall conference, or the spring conference and the fall summit. Sorry. So if you see these guys in Slack or anywhere else, be sure to say hi, give them a pat on the back. Again, it's a year-round effort to make this happen, and we hope you guys enjoy what we do. We couldn't do this without our sponsors. So our gold sponsors we have Consumer 51, Expression Engine, Foster Made, and Hop Studios. Our silver sponsors, we have Green Egg Media, Triple Nerd Score, and Green Line Creative. And then bronze sponsors, we have Aquarian, Web Studio, Digital Ocean, and JetBrains. And then friends of EE, we have Creative Arc, and we have IC360. So we greatly thank those sponsors. We cannot do what we do without you guys. Events, even digital events, cost money, and then hopefully leading up to an in-person event once again, we're going to try again. We really need those sponsorships and greatly value those. As a community member, though, you can also feel free to donate. If you go to eeconf.com/donate, click on the donate button. We appreciate those of you who donated through your ticket purchases today. It's a free event, but I know several of you guys chose to also donate with your ticket, and we greatly appreciate that. And you can also go to the donate and help make these events awesome. Speaking of awesome events, we are going to have a spring summit again. So we got a lot of feedback that everybody liked that. So that'll be a spring virtual event, and it'll just be a one-day conference. Looking forward to that. We'll get dates on that sooner here in the next month or so. However, this fall, we are going to try again for an in-person event in Philadelphia. It's going to be October 6th and 7th at Convene Commerce Square in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. You can go to our website now, eeconf.com, click on purchase tickets, and there's one super early bird ticket left. And then there's also will be some early bird tickets available. I think we got about 10 or 15 of those available. Note that one thing that I wanted to explain that's been kind of a question. We've tried to do this event. This will be the third time we tried to do this in-person event. But the fall in-person is going to be a little bit different than what we've done as far as conferences in the past. So if you were at our fall virtual conference, we had one session or a couple of times when we did more of a summit style, or what we call a summit style, which is basically everybody in the room is part of the conversation. And then we just have a moderator that might chat a little bit or bring up a few topics, but then everybody brings something to the table to chat about. And that's really what we're going for with this fall event. So that's why we call it a fall summit event. It's not just going to be go and listen to somebody talk for 45 minutes and then move on to the next talk. It's going to be a lot more interactive. It's going to be everybody in the room sitting around and chatting about a topic, sharing experiences, sharing what's worked, hasn't worked, all that kind of stuff. And I know I've already enjoyed these. I've gotten a lot of feedback that people find those super valuable. So a couple of things. So it is going to be more limited attendance. So there's not going to be an unlimited number of tickets available. And then also to make it more intimate, we've actually booking your room at the hotel. So when you purchase a ticket, that includes 2 nights accommodations at the hotel. It includes breakfast and lunch each day. And then also, of course, includes the ticket for the summit event itself. So it's going to be a lot bigger event, a lot more interactive, a lot more personal, a lot more growth from the community, and should be a lot of fun. And we're really looking forward to that. So that's going to be October 6th and 7th in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Go ahead and get your tickets now. If for whatever reason COVID continues to happen or doesn't allow us to happen, then just like in previous years, we can either refund your ticket or advance it to the next year. But one day we will meet in person again. So hopefully this is the year. All right. With all that out of the way, we have got JCOGS Design, otherwise known as Gavin Lowry. So if you see him here on the screen, or you'll see him in a minute, the face behind the cat will be revealed. I know everybody, I've mentioned Gavin several times just in the last few days, and people are like, I thought it was JCOGS. I'm like, yeah, that's Gavin. So we're excited to have Gavin join us today. He's a specialist in website backend developer working with Expression Engine. He's based in the UK, over west of London, correct, Gavin? That's what you said? West of London,
Yep.
London, east of Bristol, kind of area. He began working with E about 10 years ago and has a background in simulation and modeling. And you also probably know him from his amazing add-ons he's been putting out, including his latest image manipulation add-on that I've heard nothing but good things about. So a little plug for him, go to the E store, search for JCOGS, buy his add-on, support him and the work that he does for the community. With that, I will pass it on to you, Gavin.
Okay.
So I'm going to unshare my screen here, I think, if I can.
Okay. And I'm going to share mine. Hang on a second. Okay, there we go. Right. There we go. Can someone just tell me whether that's coming out or not? I can't see when this is happening like this. Can you see my screen, anybody? Earth 2, no. Okay, yes, all clear. Excellent, good. One of these days I'll work out how to work with multiple screens, but I haven't yet. Okay, thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate you taking the time to have a listen and participating in the EE stuff. And I found the community for EE being extremely helpful over the years, and it's nice to have a chance to try and give some stuff back. Okay, so we're going to talk about images in Expression Engine. A huge amount of imposter syndrome, I think is better putting it, in the sense that I know you guys probably know more about this than I'll ever know, but someone's got to do it. So I'll go first, and you can possibly in the questions fine tune my comments correctly. So how do we get to doing this today? Well, and a request went out and somebody said, can we juggle while riding a unicycle? And somebody else said, just ramble on about stuff. But the suggestion was whether we could do something with images and at the same time talk about how something like the JCOGS image add-on might contribute to the work that you do developing and operating websites using EE. And so that's hopefully what you've tuned in for. It's only what I'm going to try and talk about, and I'll look forward to any feedback you can give me as we go at the end about how I can make this clearer and how the guidance and advice on what you can do with images could be improved, because I'm sure there's plenty of knowledge in the community that can help with that. Anyway, so the lowdown on images. It's important to get images right. There are some phenomenal statistics around about how important images are for web design. One I saw earlier this week suggested that if you put images on a page, you get something like 6 times the level of engagement from the same page without images. We are so familiar with images on websites now. It's difficult to imagine a time when the web started without any at all. Images are quite easy, fortunately for me, giving this presentation, because there's only really 2 tags you have to think about, and that's the image tag and the picture tag. You can get very complicated with CSS, I know, but let's start with the basics. And they're just basically these 2 tags, and we have to think about what we're trying to do with them. And the aim really is very simple. It's to show the right picture in the right place without any delay at all. And the best sites are ones where the images just look right and they appear swiftly and you don't watch them slowly loading from some faraway place. It's never quite that easy. There are complications to do with editorial, to do with page design, and to do with platforms. In looking at this, we can break it down into 4 steps. If you want to do an image in a web page, you've got to find it from somewhere. So get a source and store it somewhere. variety of options for the expression engine user. You can just use the EE files service, which is perfectly adequate and just takes images and sticks them in directories on your server. You can use something like assets or Ansel, or you can just keep the images somewhere else on the web, providing you can reach them. You can incorporate them into your EE site. Second thing is, having got hold of your image, usually there's an editorial requirement to mess with it, and that might be scaling it, cropping it, adjusting it in other ways. And there are a bunch of things you can use to do that. You do some adjustments in the EE files and in assets. You can do a few more if you're using Ansel, or you can use any number of other tools to mess around with the source images to get them how you like them. Today, I'm not going to talk about either of those two to any great extent. We're going to pick it up where we've got ourselves our source image, and the question is, then what do you do with it? And there's two steps. And the first step is to fit the image into the page design and the template, and that often requires you to do some scaling, cropping, other adjustments depending on how you're going to use it. And then you need to deliver the image to the user so that it appears in their browser or their device correctly, quickly, cleanly. So let's have a look at those. What we're going to do is we're going to work our way through a very simple example. So we're going to have an example where we've got a high resolution image and we're going to put it into a web page. And for that web page, we need 3 different versions of the image. We need one for a listing thumbnail, we need another one for a little search token, and a banner view to go at the top of the page. And ideally, we want to find a way of making our page load as quickly as possible whilst maintaining good visuals. Okay, so let's have a look at our live example. Very simple. That's the initial bit of code that's going to drive our sample. Let's see if I can get you a look at this. This is where this all becomes unhinged. So if this all goes terribly wrong, just shout. Okay, hopefully, I don't know, I can't. Ugh. Hang on a second. Let's see if I can get to. Get you and shove you over here. Maybe I can see this. Sorry, I'm just slowly working out how to do the internet whilst we do this. Okay, right, so let's go back to it. Right, here we go. So yes, I can see that we can see. Good, brilliant. Finally getting the hang of the technology. So here we have our little example website, which is curiously small on the screen. You can see that's weird. Oh well, never mind. Right. So anyway, layout bugs on the side. What you can see and what I'm sending you are not the same thing, but anyway, never mind. So here we have in the middle of the screen. Hopefully you'll see it. Stop fighting the machine, Gavin. Here we have our very simple website, and it's got a space for the listing and a space down here underneath in like whatever that is, teal, for the search results. And in the best tradition of Tim Berners-Lee, there's not an image anywhere in sight, it's just text. Good enough, but we think we can improve it. So we've had a chat with our design people, and they found this really nice high resolution image of our sponsor. And we've modified our page design to add the images. So if you look at the code on the left of the screen, I don't know if it's hopefully visible, hopefully it is, you can see that all I've done is I've added in a couple of divs with some images in next to the appropriate text in the way the page is laid out. So now if we have a look and see how that turns out, well, the answer is not very good. It says going the wrong way. There we go. So we move on to the next one. There we go. Right, so there we go. So this is the actual page we end up with. And it's not really very good because you can't see anything at all because the images are swamping the field. So the question is, what can we do about this? Well, HTML provides us with some simple controls, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. One of which is that we can add to the tags for the images some dimension information. And if you add dimension information to the tag, the browser uses that information to improve its interpretation of what to do with the images when they are received. Let's have a look and see what happens when we do that. Okay, and this is what we get when we add the image information. And as you can see now, we can see our 3 images separately, and they are associated with the part of the page that we want the images to be shown on. There are some issues with this image though, and that is that although the images are the right shape, in the sense of we said we want them to be these dimensions, the browser doesn't understand about the content of the image. And so it's distorted the image to fit into the shape that you've asked it to fit it into. So if we can see, the image at the top, although it's nice, isn't actually the image that our design people gave us. And the 2 below are quite seriously distorted because we're squeezing an image that's 2000 by 1000 into a box 200 by 200. And that's not a good look. So the question then is, what can we do about that? And that brings us into the first of the areas that you get involved in when you start working with images, and that's what's called manipulation. Typically, it's about changing the dimensions of the image, but not necessarily changing its content. The options we've got are we can resize it, we can scale it up and down, we can crop it, which is we can cut a small bit out of a bigger picture, and we can combine those two. We can scale and cut as one operation, and maybe we can improve things if we do some of those. So what we've done here is, oh, hang on. Yeah, how do we do this? Sorry, back up a bit. So if we want to do that stuff, we want to scale, resize, or crop. What are your options if you're doing an EE page? Well, the first is, and what used to happen long ago, I guess, is you can just create multiple versions of the same file, and you can save them to your EE files directory or assets or Ansel or whatever, and you can just stick these multiple images away. And then when you do your page generation, you just link to different images for different parts of the screen, which is fine, but it involves you as the developer with quite a lot more work, because you've got to generate these images, and you've got to keep track of them, and you've got to modify the page design so that it can pick up where these images are. And most people came to the conclusion a while back that wasn't so helpful. So in EE, one of the things that you can work with is things called file manipulations, and you can either tell EE to generate cropped and resized versions of the images you upload as like a batch job. So every image that you upload, versions are created for all of the various manipulations you think are appropriate ones to have. Or more recently, you can do on-the-fly manipulation. And so if you look at the 3rd line here, if it's on your screen, there is an example of how you might code up an on-the-fly manipulation for EE. Now, what I would just say before we get shouted down with what's the phrase? Complaints about all this. That tag doesn't work. I can't say that I'm an expert at how to do on-the-fly manipulation in EE, but it almost works, but doesn't work properly. And one of the issues with things like with the on-the-fly manipulation in general is that to try and make it all fit into one tag, you end up with quite cryptic instructions for how to go about it, and or quite limited ones. And one of the challenges in working with these is to balance ease of use with function. The EE stuff works fine. It's just the documentation's not great at the moment, but I'm sure with some examples and some better wording, it would be easier to work out how to get actually what you want out of it. If you're going to do it in JCOGS image, and JCOGS image is just an example of how you might do this, you just add a parameter to a tag, and it works it all out for you. And I'm a big fan of a phrase which is attributed to Steve Jobs, which was things should just work. You know, he said, imagine computing like a toaster. You don't have to read instructions or load a driver to make toast. You just put the bread in and push the button and it works. And I think as a concept, that's a really good thing to aim for. And so in the spirit of that, if you want to crop an image and using the JCOGS image add-on, really all you've got to do is add the simple parameter crop equals yes to the tag, and providing you've got enough information for the add-on to work out how big the image needs to be, it'll get on and try and give you a reasonably good stab at cropping the image to suit. At the bottom of the screen, a couple of examples of what that tag might look like. The first one is similar to the one for the EE example, where we're using the tag to feed an image tag created in our template. The second one actually is worth highlighting too. For various reasons, getting the add-on to generate the tag for you is useful. We'll find out more about that as we go on. But that one, we're just saying to JCOGS image, just give me the image 1200 by 500 and cropped to fit, please. And it will generate an image tag for you, put in all the stuff you need, and it just works, which is, say, the thing we're trying for. So let's see what happens when we do that. There you go to the next one. Okay, so here we go. Yeah, so here we go. This is the code for this modified version, and a couple of things to notice. I've modified the code on this screen so that we just added the word crop equals yes as a parameter to what's shown on the screen, and I've done that for all three of them. And because we've given different widths and heights for these tags, the add-on will work it out differently. I've also replaced the conventional image tags with JCOGS image creating the tags for us. And again, this is partly for what we're going to do in a bit, but it just makes life a little bit easier, a bit less to type and a bit less to worry about. So let's see what happens. This is what happens, and boom, it looks just the same. But if we look at our cat's faces here, they're not distorted anymore. So actually what we're seeing is a segment of the parent image fitted into the space. Now, one of the things that is worth noting at this point, and for clarification, if you like, one of the things that's happened each time is the image has been scaled to fit into the box. And this is in the sort of the phrasing that goes around. This is like called smart scaling. And so rather than cutting out just a 200 or 100 pixel square in the middle of the image and just having a giant nose, the default option has been to squeeze the image down as much as you can until it's like fitting into the box, and then crop what's left. So you get as much of the image showing as you can at any given scale. You can change this, and you can change the instruction, and you can have the add-on, instead of giving you a squeezed image of the whole thing, literally just cut out the nose if you just wanted to show just the nose. That's absolutely possible too, but I haven't done it here. Okay, so let's tick on. So there we go with that. So we're doing quite well with the first part of our example. We've got our source image, we've got our listing thumbnail, we've got our banner view, and we've got our search token, but there is an issue with it. And if we look at that, our search token is square, and we wanted it to be circular. And the question is, how can we do that? That leads us to the second part of image manipulation games that you come across. And this is a transformation where you change the look of the image rather than its dimensions. And typically it's done using filters. Sometimes these filters are called filters, other times they're called other things. But really all we're doing is taking an image of a given size and applying some processing to it, so it ends up looking different. Things you can do are flipping, rotating, adding borders, blurring them, making it black and white, sharpening it, and so on. The one we're going to look at here is applying a mask. And those of you who are graphically oriented will know exactly what a mask is, because they've been kicking around in things like Photoshop and stuff absolutely forever. All it is a way of taking one shape and then using that shape to get a cutout of a bigger image. So it's a bit like cropping, but it's not square, is the best way of thinking about it. How do you do that? In EE itself, there are no native options for doing masking that I'm aware of anyway. And so what we need to do is create a custom image for each transformation, upload it to the files area, keep track of where it is, make sure we link to it and add it to our page as we do it. Or we can do some messing around with CSS, and you can do that, but we'll come back to that in the Q&A after about whether that's always a good idea or not a good idea. The JCOGS image way of doing it is just having filter as an option that we can add to our tag, and we can flip, rotate, add borders just by adding parameters to the tag, and we can do other things like blurring, black and white, sharpening, doing masks and all sorts of other things by adding a tag called, or a parameter to the tag called filter. And if you look at the text at the bottom of the screen, I've added one where we're saying for this image, we want a filter and we want it to be a mask, we want it to be circular, we want it to be placed at the center of the image, so 50% of the width and 50% of the height for the center, and we want it to be as big as we can make it on the image, 100% size fitting on the image. That's a way of instructing it how to do a filter. If we look at that in the code for the page, you can see it's been added near the bottom. Just exactly that phrase is added to our tag. So what happens? Well, let's go back, and that's what it looks like. Let's see if I can show it to you live. So if we go on and look at this and see what happens. There we go. That's the live page that we're generating. And it's fine. We've got a circle around our cat, but we have an issue with the picture. And the issue with the picture is that dark purple stuff that you can see around the edge of the circle. Or at least hope you can see. It's hard to know. I think you can, yeah, it looks like you can see. Phew. Right. So if you look at that dark purple stuff around the cat, we don't really want that there. Now that's there because currently all these images that we're creating are JPEGs, and JPEGs don't have the ability to show transparency. And so if you cut away a part of the image, you're left with a space. And in JPEG, you've got to fill that space with something. And usually it's filled with a color field. On this particular system, I've said that I want it filled with that dark purple color just to make it visible. Often it's black, sometimes it's white, but nonetheless, we've got that space. What can we do about that? Well, that brings us on to format, and we can change the image format. Again, not rocket science. There are different ways of encoding images. JPEG is one, and there are others, and some of those encoding formats support transparency. And so here we could say, well, why don't we make it a PNG? PNG allows you to have transparency, and what we've done here is simply added to the code another term, and we just said save type is PNG. So we're just saying, well, okay, do all the masking and adjust the scale and size and crop it, and also save it as a PNG. And if we do that, we end up with this. I don't know how my mimic of what you can see suggests you can't see that at the moment, but hopefully it'll come in time. If you can't see it, huzzah. Okay. Who knows? Best not look at it. Anyway, so hopefully you can see it, and if not, you will see it soon. Down at the bottom of the screen where we've got our search thing, you can see now that our cat face is in a circle and there's no purple coloration around the outside of the circle. We've just got the circle, and that's because we've said now we want to have that mask as a PNG, and the way the masking system works, the bit outside the circle is transparent, and so all we have is the bit of the image that's in the middle, and the rest is the background. So that's a step towards getting where we want to go to. So let's get this one. This is real page, which is going in real time. So there we have our real page just updated in real time. And we can see, again, we can see around the edge of the circle, and we don't see any color. Okay. So of our 3 goals for the example, we have got our high resolution image. We've got our 3 different versions. The last thing we need to think about is, can we get the page to load fast? Okay, so let's do some discussions about formats. So we've introduced the idea of changing the format of the image just now. Different formats represent the same image with different sizes of files. The smaller a file is, the more quickly it'll download to the user's browser. Here's a little table based on the images that we're looking at. And here we see the source image, the kitten photo is 422 kilobytes. If we look at the version of the page we've generated with cropping and resizing and keeping the image format as JPG, the banner view, the thumbnail, and the search token add up to about 116 kilobytes of file storage. If we were to recode that page and use PNG for the images, PNG is a much less efficient format for storing images than JPG, and using some sensible options for how to set up that coding, the PNG versions of the same images work out to be 867 kilobytes, so about 8 times larger than the JPG. If we were to do the same thing again, but recode the image using a relatively new image format called WebP, we end up with a payload of about 72 kilobytes, which is not getting on for half the size of the JPG version, not quite, and it's an awful lot smaller than the PNG version. If we want to do a quick rule of thumb, the time it takes to build your page in your browser is going to be dependent on the amount of stuff that you ship to it from the server. So if you ship 1/8, well, no, 1/12 of the content as images by changing from PNG to WebP, then that page will load 12 times faster, or in 1/12 of the time. I'm sure a mathematician will be able to explain what the right phrasing there is, but you can get it downloaded an awful lot faster. And changing the formats is really straightforward in JCOGS Image. You just put in save type equals, and whatever version format you want goes in that box. One of the things that people have said to me over the years about image formats is, yeah, but XYZ doesn't support this and won't support that, and so on. So one of the things that I've done with the JCOGS Image add-on is to try and make that slightly easier. And the first is, what versions of images can I generate? If you go to the JCOGS Image add-ons control panel, whatever it's called, the settings page, there's a drop-down. And it'll tell you in that drop-down all of the image formats that the libraries installed on the server that you're operating on is able to generate. This is the list from a server that this is running on, and you can see it does GIF, JPG, PNG, Windows bitmap format, I think called XBM, WebP, and a regular bitmap format. And those are the options you have. There are many other graphics options around, it's just this particular server doesn't generate them. And one of the things that the image add-on does is, if you give it an image format that isn't one of those image formats that the server is able to do, then it will automatically substitute a format that is appropriate that it can do. So it sort of like protects you from completely messing up as much as it can. However, that's only half of the story. The other issue we have with formats is whether or not the person's browser can view the image format that you've chosen. And again, if you look around on the internet, there are various horror stories about some formats not being supported by some browsers and bad things coming about. Currently, they're mostly reserved for things like Apple's image format used on the iPhone, which exists and works in Safari, but nowhere else. Again, to try and make this easy, back to our toaster appliance type add-on model, one of the things that Image will do, if it's running in a way that allows it to talk directly to the browser that's loading the page, is it'll ask the browser what image formats it supports. And if it turns out that you're trying to send it an image format that the browser doesn't support, it'll recode the image in one that the browser does support and send that instead. So just for that user on that particular instant, they'll get a JPEG rather than a WebP. And if you're going to be using modern formats, that's a nice bit of security. We'll come back to that in the advanced topics. There are constraints on when you can do that, but in general, one of the aims with Image is to make it easy for you to use better image formats wherever possible. Okay, so what does that mean in terms of our example page? Okay, again, all I've done is I've added another parameter to our growing tag for the images, and I've simply put in save type is WebP. And you'll also notice, if you are of eagle eye and a pedantic persuasion, I've changed the save type for the search result from PNG to WebP as well. And that's simply because WebP is a graphics format that supports transparency. So we can swap over to WebP and the page should just look fine. And that's what we're aiming for. Let's see how we get on when we do that. Boom, there we are. That's the live page. And these are WebP images. And we've got everything that we're looking for loading, and loading in something like, well, the file size to go with this is about half of what it was when it was JPG. So far, so good. Can we do any better is really the question then. So the question is, can we, how can we make this faster? And one of the things that people have learned is that if you simplify an image, it's smaller. So very simple idea, but the smaller that the image content is, the smaller the image file that goes with it. And here we have on the right hand side our kitten. At the top we've got the full fat WebP version, and underneath we've got two simplified versions of the image. And the first one is simplified to be what's called a low quality image placeholder, and the one below is what's called a dominant color field. If we look at the low quality image placeholder, it's recognizable when you compare it to the full fat proper image. So at a quick glance, they look the same. It's only when you look more closely you realize that the details are missing and so on. So it sort of works okay, but it has a big advantage. If you look over the table on the left-hand side of the page, the low quality image placeholder is just 1/6 of the size, or 1/12 of one of those, 8%. So 1/8 of the size of the WebP version. So if we were to send those images to the browser rather than the full fat versions, we could download our page 8 times faster than we were doing it. If we then look at the dominant color field, that's even smaller still, because it's got almost no content in the image, just one color, and it works out to be something of the order of 33 times smaller than the WebP image. So if we were to send a page with all dominant color fields rather than the WebP photo, it would download hugely faster than the WebP version, which is great. So if we wanted to make the page download more quickly, then it would be really cool if we could just download images that were low quality or just color fields. And sorry, in passing, the color field is calculated using obscure and peculiar algorithms, and it represents the most common color of the WebP image. And the place you see the most often, if you ever use it, is on Apple TV. So if we go to Apple TV, Apple are big fans of the dominant color field theory, and they use it for the placeholders for their video previews. So when you load the page, initially you get a whole load of dominant color tiles, and then they get filled in with the video as and when the video images or previews get downloaded to fill in the space. And it's a perfectly acceptable way of doing it, and it's very, very fast. Wouldn't it be good if we could do this but not mess up the quality of the images, is the question. Well, that leads us to this thing called lazy loading. Lazy loading is a concept that's been around in the database world for a very long time, but it's been applied to images for a long time as well. And how it works is you download to your browser a web page, and in the web page you say download the placeholder image, whether that be a low quality one or dominant color field, and you don't send it the full fat images. This is in a way to address an issue that there is with how web servers work, and that in order for the browser to render the page on your screen, the browser's got to be convinced it's fully downloaded everything it needs to download. And if you send it image tags, in its basic configuration, the browser says, I better get all these images before I show the page. So if you download all the images and they're full fat, then the browser will wait whilst it downloads the images, and then it will show you the page. It used to be worse. So back in HTTP 1 days, it would download each image one after the other in serial fashion, and then show you the page. With HTTP 2 and 3, it downloads them all in parallel, but nonetheless, it waits whilst the images get downloaded before it renders the page. So the plan with lazy loading is you send it, instead of the full fat image, you send it dominant color fields or low quality images, and it gets to the point where it says, I can show you the page quicker. And then the question then will be, if you showed the page as it was, then you would get rubbish images. So what you have then is, as part of the page load, you put a tiny bit of JavaScript in. And the JavaScript's job is to work out what part of the web page the user is looking at. And as that part of the web page comes into view, the JavaScript swaps the low quality or dominant color field image for the real image. And at that point tells the browser, oh, different image, download this image instead. And the browser goes and gets that one image, sticks it into the page, and renders that instead. And because the placeholders are identical in size to the full fat picture, the browser doesn't need to configure the layout of the page. It just swaps over the image from one image to another, just like you would with any other kind of animation that you might do on screen. And if you do that, the user doesn't actually notice that they initially got these low quality images. It just sees high quality images in the bit they're looking at. Now, this approach to lazy loading is sort of supported by HTML5 out of the box now. And so you can just add a tag to an image, and HTML5 will have a go at lazy loading. It's not perfect. It doesn't have support for placeholder images. It only works if you've got JavaScript, and it's not supported by Safari. But apart from that, it's tickety-boo, and it's a good thing. It also fails gracefully. So if the browser doesn't understand what you're asking for, it doesn't break the page. So let's see what we can do about that within EE. How do we do this? Well, for EE native, there is no native solution to doing placeholder images, and there's no way of doing the image swapping process. So if you want to do lazy loading with straight up EE, you need to do something in your template design. You need to go and find some lazy loading JavaScript. There's plenty of them out on GitHub if you look around for them. And you need to work out how you're going to get the various versions of the images yourself. If you're using JCOGS image, you simply add lazy equals one of two choices to your tag, and your job's done. What happens? JCOGS image will automatically create the placeholder. It'll create the JavaScript for the template. And add it to the template when it's sent to the browser. It also adds a no-script backup for a browser that doesn't support JavaScript. So if you sent your lazy loading to a browser that has got JavaScript turned off or just doesn't support JavaScript, then the JCOGS image version lazy loading will still show the page and still show the images. It works in Safari, and it's also compatible with images responsive mode, which we'll come on to in a bit. So let's see what this does to our website page. Again, all I've done is added one parameter to each of the image tags. Just put lazy equals LQIP to these image tags, and we end up with a page that looks like this. Now, on the right hand side of the screen that's just popped up, I did a calculation for this particular page, and there's a web payload of about 235 kilobytes. It's not quite, and the low quality image placeholder payload of the same images is about 30 kilobytes. So it's getting on for an 87%, 90% reduction in size, and it will load about 8 times faster. So let's see how this works in practice. So we come here and we'll go to the next one. Okay, so this, believe it or not, is now loading with lazy loading, and it looks exactly the same. Now, there's an issue with this, which is that we can't actually see what's going on. So what we're going to do is load a different version of this page, which has got more stuff down the bottom. So this has actually got more things lurking on the page. And hopefully this will show up on the online version. But if I scroll this down, you can see there's another cat showing up on our growing web page. Now let's have a look and see if we can see what's going on with the lazy loading. I'm just going to reload the page, right? And because the cat pictures are coming from Tinternet, we've got a different cat this time. Anyway, and I'm going to pop up the inspector. Okay, so here we have the inspector, and we have our listing of stuff over on the left-hand side of the screen. So there's a part of this image we can't see yet, which is the search result for down the bottom. Now, if we come and look at this, this is the image tag for, hopefully it'll come out. I'm not quite sure. If you can see this, fingers crossed anyway. Just quick look in comments. Doesn't appear to be a whole load of people complaining about it at the moment, so that's good. If we look here, you can see on the right hand side it's lagging a little. Oh, okay, well, anyway, hopefully you'll catch up as I talk. On the right hand side, we've got the inspector view of the image tag for the search token. So it's the equivalent of the teal bar with a circle on it. And what image has done is it's generated a tag which does lazy loading for us. I'm just going to see if I can show you what this looks like. So what we have in here is the image tag, and it's added in loading equals lazy. Now this is the HTML5 tag that tells browsers that can do it to do lazy loading, because even though we're doing lazy loading ourselves, it doesn't do any harm to have the browser have a go at it as well. And so we just add that in for good measure. There is a mode of operation for images lazy loading where all it does is trigger HTML5 lazy loading. The why you'd want to do that is unclear, because it doesn't work in Safari right now. And the next thing we've got is we've got the source of the image that's currently being shown on the web page. And if you look at this, it's a whole long string of nonsense, but at the very end of it, it says underline LQIP.webp, and that's the LQIP version of the image that we are going to display when the viewer looks at it, the user looks at it. And then following it, we've got a simple data term, and in the data term, we've got another image. And that image is the actual image that we will want the user to see when the image is displayed. And then we've got the width and the height for the image tagged on the back. So that's what has been sent to the browser. Now, also sent to the browser is a tiny bit of JavaScript down here, I think. There we go. Tiny bit of JavaScript, which is the thing that controls how the swapping business works. Now, given that the screen is going to be a bit laggy, I don't know if this is going to work, but in theory, this is a nice thing to do. If you pay attention to the line of the screen that's got the lazy loading image on it, and I scroll the page down. When the image that we are looking at gets close to the viewport, the bit that you can see, you will see on the right hand side the definition for the image tag will change. So let's just do that now. Fingers crossed this works. As you scroll down, there we are. Boom. Now it'll catch up, I think, on the screen. But anyway, what's happened is as that image came into view, the JavaScript kicked off and has changed the image tag. And what it's done is it's removed the LQIP image from the source definition, and it's inserted the one that was in our data attribute instead. And just for good housekeeping, it's also deleted the data attribute. So all we have left is a regular image tag that says, show me this image. And the image is the one, the WebP version of the cat in a circle. And that's lazy loading in practice. From the point of view of the person using the page, they just don't know any different. So all they see is the page appears normally, but the behind the scenes, the page downloads more quickly. So the only thing left to discuss on this is why would we ever worry about what we send in place of the regular image? And one of the things that people don't like is when you make changes to the web page that cause the page to reflow, reconfigure itself. And so one of the things we want to do is make sure that when we're doing this, that the size of the image stays the same when we do the swap, so that we don't see any boxes moving around or any kind of jank happening when that happens. The other is, for some web pages, if you have a very slow connection and very large images, despite the enthusiasm of the JavaScript to swap the images over, there can be occasions when the page will show you the placeholder image whilst it waits for the regular image to download and render in the page. So if you're doing that, you want something which is not going to be disruptive to the user. And a big white box is possibly more disruptive than something that looks a bit like the image that you're going to see, or a box which is roughly the same color to the view you're trying to see. So the placeholders, whether that be dominant color or LQIP, are there to reassure the user that it's all okay when they're on a slow connection. Okay, so that's lazy loading, and that allows us to do the whole thing quite quickly. Right, hang on a second. All right. Next thing then is we can go on and talk about some advanced things. These things, oh, yeah, okay, I don't know whether this is going to work. Yeah, I've seen Jace's comment about the fact that it's all a bit crap, but I don't have any means here to refresh what's going on. This is being done by hop-in, I'm afraid. I don't quite know what it's doing that means it's like this. I can slow down. Anyway, so what we're going to talk about is what happens if you send pictures to a mobile device. And mobile devices in the main are, what's the phrase, smaller than desktop computers. And so if we send images to mobile devices, they usually are smaller, or they can be smaller without problems than would be the case if we sent them to a huge, big, I don't know, whatever, 40-inch monitor. And if we're concerned about making sure that our images download quickly, that's another place where there's an opportunity for us to do something to make things work better. And the route that we have to do this are two parameters for the image tag that HTML provides. One's called source set and one's called sizes, and they work together to allow us to communicate to the browser about what size of image if there are more than one it could download, the browser should use to render a page that depends on how big the viewport that is being used to look at the page is. And that gives us a way for the browser to say, I'm a mobile device, therefore, since you've told me I need to use a small image, I'll download this small image. And another browser says, I'm a big desktop, I'll download the biggest version of the image that I can. Let's see how this works in practice. Okay, so as is the way with JCOGS image functions, we simply add to the tag one more parameter, and the parameter just says, in this case, source set equals 400. Behind the scenes, there's quite a lot that goes on. If you look at the image documentation, it explains exactly what's going on, I hope. But this says, in addition to generating the image that we've described, can you also put together the definition in the image tag and an image to go with it that is 400 pixels wide? So if the viewport is 400 pixels wide or less, tell the browser to use that image, and otherwise tell the browser to use the 1200 pixel wide image. And that's all done by adding that one tag, source set equals 400. You can have multiple different sizes. You just pipe them together and have a whole host of different sizes if you want. Just for the simple purposes of this thing, I've just put in this one 400. And if we see this, I don't know how it's going to work, but if we load up this page, and hopefully in your screen it'll load up slowly and patiently. There we go. And it's still not showing. I really don't understand why it's only giving a little bit of the page, but or what determines that. I do apologize for inability to make this work. I wonder if we can, I don't know how to force this thing to reload. I wonder if I should stop sharing and reshare. That'll do it. Hang on. Okay, there we go. Don't know if this is hopefully this might just fix it. You never know. Okay, so this is an illustration because it's really hard to see this on screen. As in, I'll show you live, but it's really hard to see live. And given how janky the hop-in stuff is, then maybe we are better discussing this way. On the left, we've got our website, and the image at the top of the screen is the one that we added the source set equals 400 tag to. So if you look at this thing here, it's our little tag over here, source set equals 400. What that's done is it's caused in our tag image has added these two parameters. It's added a sizes parameter that says max width 400, use 400, otherwise use one that's 1200 wide. And below that, we've got another parameter, the source set parameter, which is a list of image sources with tags. And it says there's one called images kitty 400W, which is 400 wide, and another one called images kitty 1200, which is the default. And this information is interpreted by a browser. And it says, okay, well, if the width of the image is less than 400, I'll use kitty 400, and otherwise I'll use kitty 1200. And if we look at how it works in practice, the image on the left is for something like an iPad or something like that, and it's downloading the 1200 wide image, about 56K in this particular instance. The one on the right, which is on a mobile phone, I think iPhone something or other, 8 or something, it's actually downloading the 400 wide because the image, the viewport is 375 pixels wide. And so, okay, less than 400, therefore I'll download the 400 wide, and it's downloading the 400W version, and that's 10K. So just by adding this one parameter to our thing, it means that for people on mobile connections, we are saving for this one particular image about 46K's worth of download to show the same page. And within plausible reasons, you can't tell the difference because you can't. There is a long debate about retina modes and stuff, but in basic terms, you can't do anything. No, that's how it works. So let's have a look and see whether we can show you this live. Okay, so this is our image. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the inspector for this. And if we look at the banner image on this, oh, it's gone crapped out again. Hang on, I'll reload the screen for you. Hang on. Okay, there we go. So if we look at this and look at our image source on the left-hand side, you can see that the tag has got a lot more complicated. Remember at the beginning I said that using the image to generate the tags for you is helpful because of what happens later on. This is why. If you look at this tag now, it's straightforward. It's taking the master image and it's lazy loading it and so on. Well, in fact, it's not lazy, it's just doing source set on this one. But it's got a whole lot of more crap in there than you had before. And if you're doing this all by hand, constructing all of the bits to make sure that EE builds your tag properly just becomes more and more tedious as time goes by. Whereas just having one tag thing, just go and do it, makes life a lot easier. Anyway, but if we look at this now, you can see here, if I can open this up, yeah, it does work well, it's good. It's really hard to see because this is just how Firefox's debugger works. But in here, this is our source set thing, and it's got a longer file name just because of the way the image names thing. But we've got our 400W version and we've got our 1200W version in this source set thing. And we've got our sizes thing down here saying up to 400 wide, use 400, otherwise use 1200. Okay, so far so good. So now, if we look at what image is being loaded here, you can just see it, if that's reliable. The pop-up that comes from Firefox says this is the 1200 wide version of the image that we're looking at, because the viewport is whatever wide it is, 810 pixels wide, so bigger than 400. Therefore, I'm going to load the 1200 wide version of the image. Okay, so what we're going to do now, and this is definitely going to break Hopin, apologies in advance. I'm just going to change this and say, let's look at it from the viewpoint of an iPhone SE. Right, so then we have on the left-hand side the whatever it's called, the iPhone version of this image. And if we come back over to here and look at what image now is being loaded, you can see, oh, you can't see. I'll shut it down and restart it. Hang on. Now that you know what to do, I guess it's straightforward. I'm sure this isn't what they intended, but anyway. Boom. Right, so now we've got the iPhone version loaded, and if we do the pop-up on this, you can see just showing there, this is loading a 375 wide version of the image rather than the 1200 wide version of the image. And 375 wide because that's how wide the viewport is rather than anything else. So it's like, you know, we've got the small version of the image being loaded. All we had to do was add source set equals 400 to our tag. Quite a lot of stuff is going on behind the scenes to make it possible, including image generating two versions of the image. It generates one which is 400 wide and one which is 1200 wide, names them and works out what to do with them and builds a tag for you and caches them and does all that stuff, and it's job done. But all you have to do is put in one that's 400 wide as well as the full size, which hopefully is a useful thing. Okay, the other thing about this is also fully supportive of the lazy loading thing, and so you can do this and do lazy loading and you get a very long tag then, but nonetheless you can do both of those things together. Okay, so that's that. A couple of other things and I will stop. You know, I hear the cries of relief abound. A bit more about what to do about mobile devices. Image format compatibility, less true now than it used to be. Oh, we've got this effing reload thing. In the unlikely event that it's useful, I can send out these text slides as a PDF or something. Okay, so compatibility. Some mobile clients don't render all image formats, and that's been cited as a reason why people don't want to use things like WebP, because it's not compatible and stuff like that. If you are running a site that hasn't got a static cache, i.e. one that polls EE when the page loads rather than just getting it from some offline file base, then EE will have the ability to do that for you, do the compatibility for you. EE will talk to the browser that's being used, poll from the browser what image formats the browser is able to render. And if it turns out that the EE template is asking image for a version of the image that is not supported by the browser that the user is using, image will on the fly recode the image into a browser format, into an image format that browser can see. And so typically it works out, somebody hits the site and the images are coded in WebP and they're using a browser that doesn't support WebP. Image will simply recode for that particular user at that instant a JPEG version of the image and send them that instead. That gets cached, so the next time someone comes who can't do it, that image is already there, so that will be pulled from the cache as well. But it's determining whether it sends the JPEG version or the WebP version is done live by talking to the browser itself. If you use a static cache, that doesn't work because EE isn't involved in rendering the page. And there is a solution to that, and that's to use the picture tag. And we're not going to talk about that today, but the picture tag allows you to set up a whole host of alternatives for different scenarios. And one of those scenarios is if this person's asking for an image that if we're trying to send them an image they don't have the ability to render, then you're sending the browser some alternatives. So if you can't do this one, then do that one instead. You can also do different images for different viewport sizes through picture. So if you want to have one image for small devices and a different image completely for large devices, again, you can do that through some of the structures that go into picture. And that's what we're talking about with the art direction bullet here. We've been talking about just making images bigger and smaller. Artistic people will say, well, I don't want the same image on small things, I want a different one. I want a big image on focus, a zoomed in close-up of the cat's nose on small devices, and a big thing that has the whole panoply of the cat in the washing basket on a desktop view. And picture gives you the ability to specify all of those alternatives. One of the things that is in the pipeline for JCOGS image is the ability to generate picture tags automatically. Not there yet, but it's something which is in development right now. The difficulty with it isn't doing it technically. The difficulty is finding a syntax for specifying what you actually want the picture tag to contain that doesn't get so convoluted and complicated that no one will ever understand it. But if we can crack the syntax part of it, then picture tag generation is on the way. And then last thing, and I'll stop, caching. Right, so yes, caching is a really good idea, and Image has a sophisticated approach to caching to try and make sure that you get the best possible performance out of your EE system. So it supports dry principles in two ways. One is by doing the caching, if you have a good enough cache that you can work out whether or not the particular image you want is in the cache or not, then you don't need to keep on recalculating the image each time. And say some care has been given to try and make sure that the way in which images in image are cached is accurate and reliable, so you don't end up with mismatches. The other thing about that is not so much about whether or not the image is cached, but how the templates are cached. And one of the things that is useful is if you have the same image appearing on several pages in your site, it'd be really helpful if the same cached image was used each time, and not always possible given the way in which caching systems are set up to work with EE. Some of them are based on hierarchical template driven or template or page path driven structure, which means that you have a copy in the cache of the same image multiple times because you've got multiple pages each with the same image on it. JCOGS image has got a unified cache that says all the images are in one big box, and it relies on the way in which the caching naming convention works to pick out which image you're going to use in a particular case. But it is intended to avoid this issue about having a massive tree of folders full of images that you're not quite sure where they go and what they do. And that increases storage, makes the whole thing slower, and doesn't necessarily give you what you want. Last comment, image caching and template caching should be the best of friends, really, but they're not. Template and site caches can cause problems, partly because of how they work and partly because of how users use them. But if you've got template and static caching going on and you want to do image caching, then you can get yourself into a real pickle, because they refresh in a different cycle, or may refresh on a different cycle, and that may end up with you either excessively recalculating images you don't need to recalculate, or conversely having gaps in your images where the images have refreshed or are trying to refresh, but the template hasn't allowed them to. On the basis of it's best to pick the battles that you can win, JCOGS image tries very hard to be well behaved, and so it tends to be less aggressive in its caching strategy than it could be, as it tries to make space to accommodate template and site and static caches as best it can. It doesn't really always work, and so if you have a problem with this kind of add-on and you have an image problem, usually a good place to start is to refresh template, site and static caches, but it tries very hard to accommodate as best it can. If you turn off template, site caching, images caching works better, but you've got to get a compromise, and life's a compromise. And say, rather than requiring you to do funny things with template and site caches in order for image to work, image does it less aggressively, but hopefully does it in a way which means that caching does work. Oh yeah, I forgot about this one. Last one. JCOGS image came about out of frustration because of CE image. CE image provides similar services to JCOGS image, but it hasn't been maintained for many years, and it's not PHP compatible and has other issues as well. And no one else had done it, so I wrote JCOGS image initially as a drop-in replacement for CE image, using modern technologies and modern methods and so on, and it's grown a bit since then, but basically that's where it started. And kudos to Aaron for the work he did on CE image. But anyway, JCOGS image does everything pretty much that CE image does and more. And for the most part, it's a simple search and replace update option. So all you need to do for most sites is just search for CE image in your templates and replace it with JCOGS image in your templates, and everything else should just work. Go to great lengths to try and make sure that the parameters structure that you can use for JCOGS image mirrors the parameter structure that you can use for CE image. There are a couple of exceptions. There are some filters that I haven't implemented, and rounded corners aren't there yet, but they're coming. And a future update working towards building like a one-click updater, so you can just click a button and it'll do all that for you. Back to the toaster analogy. But if you have CE image websites you're trying to upgrade, then this is a really simple, straightforward way of going about it. You literally just install the add-on, search and replace CE underline image for JCOGS underline image, and you're basically done. And it works faster, produces slightly smaller images, does many more things beyond what CE Image does, and it's a bargain in terms of pricing. So okay, here's an illustration of this. Again, it's really hard to show you this on screen, and I'll refresh the page because it'll take forever, possibly, for it to do that. Hang on a second. Must turn the lights on too. It's getting dark here. Okay, here we go. This is an illustration of how this works in practice. Okay, so oh, ignore the stuff at the top which is left over from another page. I didn't get rid of that. Okay, so what we've got here, two images. One on the left is a CE image tag, which is generating an image, and it's a JPEG image, and it's got a quality of 20. On the right hand side is exactly the same tag, and all I've done is change CE image for JCOGS image, and you get identical results. There's only one image, but I can show you, trust me, they're identical. And then below that, there's another one where we've got a CE image with a brightness filter, and on the right hand side, literally just exactly the same tag, just changed the add-on to JCOGS image, and you get a similar thing. Now I'm going to put my life into my hand here, and I'll see whether I can do this. There we go. We want to make this a laptopy thing. Okay, and then let's refresh the screen. Okay, boom. Right, here we have a real page that I use for testing, and on the left hand side we have a multitude of possible tags in CE. On my hand side are multiple possible tags that you can generate in CE image, and on the left hand side the identical tags with JCOGS image in instead. And this goes on and on and on, and the idea is, as you scroll down, they should always look pretty much identical. And this is different configurations, and if we scroll down to the filters, here we get to the filtery section. It's catching up. There we go. And so on, and as you go down, you can see both sides of the screen. Basically the images in each case are identical, and that's just the way it should be. There are some specific differences. If we get down here, grayscale, and here we get the pixelates here. JCOGS image uses completely new code. It's not got any dependence on CE image code, and in some places you can see the difference, and pixelate is one. And like for like, pixelate with the same parameters produces a slightly softer image in JCOGS image than you get from CE image, and it's to do with aliasing of the edges. You can see what's going on is JCOGS image tries to alias the images slightly more aggressively than CE image does, and those sorts of differences, there are a handful of them. And then if we scroll down a bit further, there are some things the image does that CE image doesn't. So these are masks. So here's a star mask on the left hand side. There's no equivalent in CE image, just get the image. There's a circle we saw earlier, triangles and pentagon, an ellipse, and this is my favorite. This is just done with a black image on a white background, and any black image with a white background you feed it, you can use as a mask. And so here I've just got a felt tip pen and scrubbed across some paper and scanned it in, and on the left hand side you can see that has been used as a mask too, and it's just as simple as that. Boom, there you go. Right, that's I think by every possible means all we've got time for today, so I'm going to stop, and you can go and have a cup of tea and all that sort of stuff. Let's get this back. Okay, there we go. So in best tradition of how to do these things, summary: get a source, manipulate suit editorial, fit it into page, design, deliver to the user. What you're going to do is send as little information as you can initially, get the right size, the right format, use lazy loading and caching if you can. And then last thing is just make life easy. Treat these things like toasters rather than vintage sports cars. And if you can get the tool to do it for you, why not? Just there's better things in life to do than try and work out how to code up a source set tag. And we can do other things with our time. Anyway, that's it. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions and there's any time left, we could do that. Otherwise, someone can do some unicycling, I think is the other thing we can think about doing. Okay, that's it. I'm going to give up on this. Back to Andy.
Awesome.
Work how to do that.
Yep. Thanks, Gavin. Thank you so much for that. Sorry about the technical difficulties, both to Gavin there. I know that's hard as the presenter, and then also to the community here. I'm gonna take this video and send it to Hopin and try to get some feedback, maybe for best specs for our presenters and figure out what's going on there so that we can avoid that in the future. Going back and forth here. So we do have a good handful of Q&As. If you guys want to vote on your questions that you want to see answered, go over to the Q&A tab and click the thumbs up, because I'm just going to start at the top based on how many thumbs up they get. All right, Gavin. Oliver says, "Oh yeah, please send out the slides on it as a PDF, please." Okay. So if you want to send that to me, I'll put that like in a Google Drive or somewhere, or unless you have those hosted somewhere, and we'll link those in the YouTube video when we put that out.
No worries. I'll send them to you, and then you can just tell me what the best thing to do with them is.
Okay.
Hang on a second. I think I'm gonna have to log back in. Ooh, crap.
All right, and as we, oh, he's relogging in. Okay. So I'm gonna do some magic while we wait. No. Let's see. Can I dance? I can dance. Is it considered good dancing? I don't know. My bride certainly doesn't think it's good dancing, and my kids are embarrassed. So I would consider that good dancing. Dad dancing is always the best. Yes, it is. And my jokes are hilarious. Let's see. Puntastic. Wow. I'm very much resisting right now doing magic tricks that my dad used to do in moments like this. So I promised I would never do those. Do it. Maybe next time, Mike. It's got to be more spontaneous. Hopefully we're going to stick around, though, while we wait for Gavin here. After we get through the Q&A, hope to have some members of the EE team on here for a little Q&A with the community. I know it's getting a little late here. Can you do the thumb trick on your hand? What's the thumb trick? Here's my thumb. Is that a trick? I don't know. Or is that when you do like the whole like this thing? Like, yeah, I don't know how to do that. Something like this, maybe. Something. I don't know. Okay, yeah. I don't know how to do that. I don't know the setup for that. If you would like to see Oliver share his audio and video and perform the thumb trick, please say so in the chat. Okay. Hold on, I need to message Gavin. And bye. All right, guys, I have some administrative stuff to do because I think the session technically is over. And so Hopin won't let him back into the session here. Yeah, I think there's 45 minutes left on the event, but the session itself, I think ended maybe.
Aha! Yay! Oh, sorry about that. Don't know what happened.
All right, sorry about that. Okay, so unfortunately, since you came back, we will not see Oliver's thumb magic trick.
Oh no!
So maybe that'll be another. Maybe that'll be the next meetup. Is EE
Absolutely.
community talents other than web development? So.
Right. Anyway,
All right.
You said there were questions, or maybe questions. I don't know, but we'll see.
There you go. All right, so let's get to some of these questions. Mike had thoughts about CDN here. He asked, any thoughts on using the web server for image storage versus using a CDN? Does the plugin, I assume that you mean JCOGS image, work with CDN images?
The simple answer is yes. Image will work with anything basically that you can provide it with. All it needs is either, well, quickly, all it needs is a link to an image, whether that be local on the server or anywhere on the internet. If you can provide it with the link to the image, then it can do its stuff with that. It doesn't care. It's not fussy. What image does, and in a different way, but what CE image did in its day as well, was if you give it an image that's not local to the server and you want the image to be processed, then it's got to download a copy of that image in order to be able to do the processing, because it doesn't, or PHP doesn't like doing image operations on memory particularly. You need to start with something that's in a file somewhere. So the downside of using CDNs to store the source images is that it doesn't always help, because you'd have to download the image to the server so the EE's on for the image add-on to do its stuff. Using CDNs to store processed images is a really good idea, because once the image has been processed and written to a cache, then the closer you can get that cache to the user, the better. But how you then get your server to talk to the CDN is really to do with how the server talks to CDN rather than the image add-on. So two parts to the question. The answer to the first bit, for source files, it's not a great idea to stick them on a CDN. It's no better than sticking them on any other kind of web server. For distribution, if you can use a CDN for distribution of your processed images, absolutely you should, but that's true for anything that you'd ship from your server, not just the images, and you'd have to negotiate with the CDN how you get EE to talk to the CDN for doing its stuff. But providing you can do that, there's no reason why you can't. It'll be interesting to see how things like, I think Assets and Ansel both can talk to S3 storage. I'd be interested to know whether that includes any kind of processing remotely. I suspect with both of them, if you use S3 for your bulk storage and then you want it to do any kind of on-the-fly modification, it downloads them locally anyway. But that I haven't looked into it. I haven't done any research. So CDN is generally good, but not for source images. For source images, there's no advantage to them being on a CDN as to anywhere else, really.
Okay, good to know. Travis asked, does JCOGS use the same cache folder structure as CE image? If not, what is the cache folder setup that the add-on does use?
Okay, I could get very boring here, and I'm not going to. If you go and look at the documentation for image, There's a link to it from the image add-on page in Expression Engine Store if you can't find it any other way. But there is a little bit of text describing how it works. But the mechanically, it's very simple, especially when you compare it to what happens in CE Image. The CE Image has two caches, not just one. It's got a cache for remote images and a separate cache for processed images. The remote and processed image cache in the CE Image try and mirror something to do with where the images were found in the way the cache is written. So that you'll find it's got subfolders and subfolders and subfolders, and they reflect either the URLs that we use to retrieve the images, or they reflect the paths that were given by the templates when the templates were creating the images. And so they become quite unwieldy and difficult to work with. And in the case of CE Image, prone to duplication. If you've got the same image on different places, you get multiple copies of it in your cache, which is either a good or bad thing. But anyway, that's how it works. For JCOGS Image is much simpler. There is a folder, which is where the cache is. And you can choose where that folder is in your setup. It's anywhere below the web root, but basically there is a folder. The default, I think, is images/JCOGS image/cache. I think. Anyway, there is a folder, and in there, everything is in there. All the images for your site go into one big folder. And what happens is the file names given to the images in the cache are used to manage the cache. So there are 4 elements in the file names that you see for a JCOGS image, processed image. The first bit is the file name of the source image, whatever that happens to be, if it's from a local source. If it's from the web, it's either one that's made up or it's one that is taken from the path to the image on the web, depending on what kind of thing you're downloading from the web. So if there's a distinct thing it can call a file name, it'll use that. If there isn't, it'll try and guess something based on the path. The second bit is there's a little block which is a hex representation of the cache life for that image. So you can set it to be perpetual, which is what CE Image does and never deletes anything, or you can give images a life in the cache, and there's a little block that tells the add-on what the life for that particular image when it was saved was set to be. Then there's another block which is a hash of all of the options that were chosen to go into making that image, and also the path to the image. And they all get bundled up together and hashed. And any parameters that you've set for that image get included in that block of data. And that gives a relatively unique combination of I think it's a 40 character hash. Anyway, you get this thing, and that's useful for differentiating different images based on what processing happened to those images and where they came from. So if you have the same named image on 2 different paths, and the only difference in the paths is one's got a 1 in it, one's got a 0 in it, image will still know the difference, and it will still find them separately in the cache. It doesn't get confused like that. And then the last part of the file name is a little block that if it's a special version of the file, so like it's a source set image or a placeholder image for lazy loading, then a little tag gets pushed on the back of the file to say what kind of image that is. And that's what goes on. All those files get dumped into the folder, one folder. So if you want to clear your cache, you just delete one folder and it's all gone. If the folder's not there, JCOGS will try and make it appear. You can move those files around, you can relocate them to different folders, copy them back. They're just files. There's nothing special about them, and it works just fine. Okay, so that's caching.
Perfect. I think you kind of just answered this, but Oliver asked for generated image files cached on the server or generated on the fly every time. So apparently they are cached.
Well, you can choose for them not to be. So one of the tags that you can set that's a difference between JCOGS image and CE image. And CE image, everything is perpetually cached. You've got no choice. That's it. And there's an option to say overwrite the image cache copy as one of the parameters in the tag. For JCOGS image, there's a parameter called cache, and in that you can set the duration of the cache, just like you would for a template or something or a tag using EE otherwise. If you set that cache time to 0, then the image is never cached. And every time you run the tag, it'll generate a clean new version of the image for you. So you can disable that activity simply by sticking a tag in saying don't cache it. Most of that sort of thing have system-wide defaults. And so one of the defaults is what's the default cache duration you want to apply to an image if it's not set any other way. And you can set that to 0 too. So you set that to 0, nothing gets cached, and everything is generated on the fly as you want it. And you can mix and match as you like. So you can set the default to be perpetual caching, and have some that have no cache and some that have a cache lifetime and get replaced after a certain period of time, or anything else you can imagine. All is possible.
Awesome. So XL Chia ask, are Retina images supported with source set?
Right, no, at the moment they're not. Source set has multiple modes of operation. So one of the modes of operation is you use it to tell the browser about options for the width of images. There's another way of using it where you tell it about pixel density. You can't co-use both methods at the same time in the same source set. So you have to choose one or the other. If you look at the documentation in detail for how source set works, both of them use real pixel resolution to determine what's going on. So if you are looking at an image and the browser knows it's on a Retina screen, then the browser will say that the width of the image is so many real pixels rather than what you said it is. So if you said you want 500 and the pixel density is double, the browser will treat that as 1,000 images, and it will follow the instructions in source set based on the one for images 1,000 pixels wide, because that's just how it works. So if you want to do them both, if you want to do Retina and you want to have different images for different size devices, that's okay, you can. You just have to put in more options, and you just put in options for double the resolutions, and you put double the resolution options in, then they'll get picked up like Retina images. The 2x, 1x, 3x type stuff is just a bit of shortcut to doing the same thing. The other thing that you can do, which we didn't talk about, but I can do, the second part of source set is this sizes parameter, which is how you tell the browser which image to use when, based on effectively a media query. You can actually do clever things with that. All that JCOGS image does is set up a media query that loads images based on the width of the viewport. You can actually do other things too. So you can have a set of rules that say, okay, if it's less than 500 pixels wide, I want you to load this big image, and if it's bigger than 500 wide, I want you to load the small image, because your page layout is doing different things, and you shift it to a box in the corner, and you want a small image on big sizes, but you want a big image on small sizes. You can do all that in the sizes thing, and you can basically write any old media queries you like, and against that media query say, and use this image if you're using this. If this media query is satisfied, use this image. Those rules are progressive, so it takes the first one that fires, whatever that might be. So what image lets you do is you can, if you don't put a sizes tag into your JCOGS image tag, it'll create one for you. If you want to do something special with it, you can write your own sizes rule in your own media queries, put them in and add them as simply as sizes equal this media query, and then JCOGS image will prepend that to the start of its own sizes rules. And so if your rules then fire, they will be the ones that determine what images get loaded when. If they are defective and or they don't fire, then the JCOGS default ones will still be there, and they'll get picked up eventually when it runs out of other things to look through. So you can do all that stuff. You can really go to town on it if you're clever enough to do all the work on that, and image will tolerate it and support it as you go. But To the particular thing about does it do retinal images, no. I did think about maybe putting in a parameter that lets you specify that as an alternative, but actually if you know what is going on, it's like becomes pointless fairly quickly. So there we go. So not in that sense, but if there was a huge demand for it, we could write a modification that allows that to work, because the ideas are basically similar between the two versions.
Awesome.
Okay.
Yep. And this is why when I was building websites, I did very little with images and just dropped them in there because, I knew about retina images and everything else. And I got to admit, most sites I built, I just had one image and just put it in there, or maybe use CE image to cache it. But I know I had performance hits for images because it just gets so detailed and so many configurations and options. So,
yeah. And I mean, I'm torn, because on the one hand, I'm absolutely committed to this, make it as easy as you can possibly can be, and try and make sure that all of the parameters have really simple defaults. So you just say yes, and it'll just work. But you're right, if you get into it, there are so many finicky options you can get to. It's very difficult to find a way of doing that where you don't become really nerdy and write add-ons that have documentation burdens that are an immense, I know, bother to read it. And getting the balance right between those two things is I think part of the value of add-ons like this is the editorial bit that says, well, actually you could do all sorts of things, but really almost all the time most people just want to do this, and we'll make that really easy, and you'll get a good solution without trying too hard, and then leaving enough headroom for the people who are really clever at these things. So they want to dig deep and they want to do something complicated, then they can. But actually, I'm like you, I don't really have a hugely good understanding of all these things, and I'm not artistic in the slightest, so I just want stuff that works. And if I can put something in that's a bam, great, that just works, I can worry about something else now. That's a good outcome, really.
Yeah, well, I know you're greatly valued in the community, especially for this add-on, because that's exactly what it does. Just by using something like JCOGS image for all my images, it would exponentially already increase the speed and the performance of images on my site just by dropping that in there, if I don't even worry about all the extra settings and everything. So
that's hopefully, fingers crossed, how it's meant to work. And the basic idea is you set some defaults, stick it in your site, and it just goes better and does everything nicely, and it just works. That's great. And then if you want to dig deeper, you can set all sorts of weird options and do clever things. Is the idea.
So knocking out these questions some more. Eric says we use Cloudflare at the moment with the caching there. Mess with the caching of JCOGS is using, and the answer is no. Correct? Not at all.
Not at all. No.
So I'm gonna remove that one. Mike asked, okay, so back with the source set parameter, when you just put 400 into it,
yes.
A high level 30,000 foot view of what does that exactly do? It does more than just set the max width, setting 400, right? That has to do with the sizes attribute and stuff as well, correct? Okay.
So what does it do? It, again, you can look there. I'll fix the page, but there is a page that describes it. But what does it do? It generates the two images. So we just got the 400 case rather than 17 different options. It'll do 17 different versions, but just put 400 in. It'll do two things. It will generate a scaled version of the image, which is 400 wide, rather than whatever it would otherwise be, and save that and know it's been saved. It will then set up the source set rule and the sizes rules for the image tag to say, if the viewport is less than 400 wide, use the small image, and if it's bigger than 400 wide, use the big image. And it'll put all that together in an image tag and output it to your template. And that's what happens. And then both images are cached, both images are available, and that's all it does. You can do more with it than that, but that's basically the high level 30,000 foot view. Is it generates all of the versions of the files you need for whatever rule that you specified, adds those, or formats the rules and the sizes parameters correctly based on viewports. So you give it the viewport widths you want different images, and it'll generate a rule for that, and put it all in an image tag and send it off for you.
Awesome.
Yeah, so that's what happens.
Okay, so this one could probably be a EEU article in and of itself here, but Elizabeth asked, with such flexible manipulations available, what is an ideal source image file in terms of size, optimization, and format? So
Yeah.
is there kind of a catch-all answer here, or is it very dependent on application? When is too big of a source image too big? You know?
Yeah. Okay. That you definitely can get too big, and one of the things that 1.2 of JCOGS image has in it that is a new thing that we've added because of issues people have had. You can now set as one of the default options the maximum file size that it'll try and process. So you can have
Oh,
you
that's
can have
nice.
monstrously big files on your server, and that's fine until you try and do an operation on them and you run out of PHP memory, or you run out of time, because there's usually a limit on how long a PHP process can run before it assumes it's broken and stops everything. So rather than having your website die because the images are too big, there's a rule that says, okay, anything bigger than this we won't touch. You can set it to whatever you want, but in testing, anything above about 4 megabyte images, you get into diminishing returns. So if you're uploading like a raw image straight out of your DSLR camera that's 50 megs or whatever, it's like, yeah, it's a great image, but it's like, for what you're doing and the tools that you're using, it's just the one kind of image. So as a general rule, about 4 megs, and 4 megs you can go up to about, I don't know, 3000 by 2000 pixels for most color images. And again, for most purposes, that's just well, not way too big, but it's big enough. And you know, any bigger than that, you wouldn't see any benefit. And smaller than that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's size. So about 4 megs. Probably anything more than 3000 wide, you're probably getting into diminishing returns. Going small, these days there's no real need for source images. There's no real need to worry about saving space. The days of having only 2 megabytes of disk storage are long gone. So I wouldn't think there's any advantage to saying, rather than that, I'll have a tiny one. So my policy is you have a files directory full of high resolution images, and then you just create distribution copies that go to your templates that are the
Yeah.
right size for whatever purpose you have based on the originals. And that's a model that works fine.
You know, and that's another advantage of this add-on, because I don't think CE Image had that ability to limit file sizes. That would
It
be,
doesn't, no,
yeah,
it just cracks.
because we ran into that quite often on some sites, especially we had some sites that dealt with realty or something that needed a lot of galleries, and quite often the site would fail and nobody would know why this is failing, and it was because, you know, PHP memory limits were hit trying to process a 10 megabyte image that somebody just posted.
Yeah.
So I love that what you did here is not only helping the community as far as making image processing easy with the tag, but also you make it easy for our users, because if we can do that, then we can just set a file size or something and say, like, okay, upload any images up to this size and we're going to take care of it.
Yeah.
And it's not going to crash your site.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, there is a file limit in files in EE, so you can stop people uploading files that are too big just already.
Yeah.
It's just, until now, you couldn't stop them processing images that were too big.
Right.
Anyway, but that's, yeah. As for format, I don't think it really matters particularly, as long as your server can read it. It doesn't really matter. There, yeah, it doesn't. I don't think there's a particular advantage of one or not. People who are picky prefer formats that don't mess up the image too much. But again, for web use, it doesn't really matter. If you're doing photo printing, may be different, but for web use, basically whatever you've got that the server can read is perfectly fine. Go for it.
All right. Feature requests. Is it possible to have JCOGS not process animated GIFs?
What's that? Sorry, is it possible for it to not process animated GIFs?
Right.
Okay. I can confidently say it doesn't process animated GIFs.
Okay, there you go.
So one of the things about the current thing that's been on the to-do list for ages is the library that's being used at the moment for some of the image processing fixes animated GIFs, and I need to write some new code to get around that. But I haven't done it yet. So it will one day we'll do animated GIFs, but right now, if you send an animated GIF, you can get a GIF back, but it'll be a static one. Yeah.
Oh, so it won't allow it to continue to be an animated GIF. It'll just be a
If you
static.
process an animated GIF in image, then you get what you get back is an image based on the first frame of the animated GIF. Unfortunately.
Okay, so that may be the feature request then, is to
Oh, well,
allow animated GIFs to pass through or something. Okay.
yeah, and if it's possible to do, we will do it. I'm intrigued to know how you apply some of the transformations to animated GIFs, just technically. But assuming we can overcome those hurdles, then there's no reason at all why we shouldn't do these things with animated GIFs as well as everything else. But right now it doesn't. Actually, that's a good point. That's a very good. So an aside that I forgot to mention. One of the things that someone asked about a while back, which is relevant to this sort of, is what about image optimizing programs? There are various things around which claim to optimize JPEGs and optimize PNGs and all that sort of stuff, make them smaller is really what they do. The way in which mostly they work is to cheat. So what they do is they make the file smaller by removing flexibility from the file. So, and there's nothing wrong with that particularly, but a compressed PNG is limited to compared to a real PNG, even though it's smaller. And the first thing that JCOGS image has to do when it receives a compressed PNG is to convert it back into real PNG so you can do anything to it. And it's one of these things where those programs exist and they do something, which is to make large images slightly smaller. They don't work quite so well for JPEGs, they work quite well for PNGs just because of the kind of things they do. And one of the questions was, would image be able to do that kind of optimization? And the answer is it doesn't at the moment, and it probably won't. Partly because of the way in which those optimizers work is not consistent really with the live distribution of images, but also just because image works quite hard to make files as efficiently small as it can do. And if you're worried about PNGs enough to want to compress them, you really ought to use WebP because it's a fraction of the size, like for like, more functional and does the job. And so it's like solving a problem that's not really there. If you're concerned about file size and you want to do something weird, like, I don't know, try and compress a JPEG by taking out of its palette and stuff, and taking out some stuff, it's not really going to make a huge difference compared to just change the format to one that's tiny. And if you use a format that's small, then your streets ahead rather than messing around, fiddling about trying to optimize something that doesn't really need optimizing.
Sure.
So anyway, there is an issue about what happens with optimization. There's no reason at all why you can't then optimize the output from a JCOGS image activity. So if you optimized a cached JCOGS image file, it'll still work and it'll be fed from the cache. So one of the things, if you're concerned about that, if you want to, is generate a cache load of images for your page and then just run that page through the optimizer of your choice. Providing the optimizer doesn't change the file name, then those optimized files will be available and used in place of whatever JCOGS image created. But it's really almost, apart from PNGs, it's not worth the effort. And if you've got PNGs, then just stick them into WebP anyway, because they're a fraction of the size and more functional.
Okay. This is I think the most questions we've had for a meetup, so this is good stuff. So Oliver asked if uploading images using the native EE file manager or including it in inline with the text block using the rich text editor, how do we output that image using JCOGS manipulations? So let me kind of group this into a bigger thing if it works, because Edward also just asked if this works in like a fluid field image grid. I think that would be a little bit easier because you can wrap the output of that fluid field image grid with the JCOGS tag. But if it's in a rich text block, or let's say you're using another WYSIWYG editor or something like that, does it work with those? How can we do that?
Yeah, actually, that's a really good question, and I completely forgot to mention any of that. So kudos to question asker. The answer is it's really straightforward, and it's something you could do in CE image as well. So I can't claim that it's an original idea. There are a handful of different tags that you can insert into your template, and one of the template tags you can use is ending in bulk. So you put exp : JCOGS image : bulk, and it's a tag pair. So later on you put the closing part of that. You can put into that bulk tag any of the parameters that you would put into a JCOGS image tag, and do any of the operations that you would do in a JCOGS image tag. But it's different because what happens is it takes anything that's between the opening and the closing tags, whether that's the output of rich text field, output whole load of fluid fields, or any old stuff, whatever it is, template output basically. It takes all that template output and it scans that template output for any image tags that it can find. And so if you've got a rich text field and you've dropped a picture into it and there's an image tag in there, then the bulk tag will scan that, find the image tag, and effectively apply whatever processing options you've set in the bulk tag to that image, and generate a JCOGS image version of it, insert into the template the correct image tag based on whatever preferences you've got, and then send that output back on again. So it does it very smoothly, very neatly. You just literally, in terms of your template design, you just put before and after your rich text variable, you just put bulk tag with whatever options you want and close it after the thing. So for example, in that illustrated in the website thing that we were doing just now, actually there's a bulk tag around all of the tags to stick a class into the tags. So one of the things you can do is if you want, or you've got a rich text field and you want to add, I don't know, image fluid or fluid image, whatever it is, the bootstrap fluid image tag to all the images in your block, you can just do that by putting JCOGS bulk tag at the start, class equals fluid or fluid image, or whatever it is from bootstrap, and a tag at the bottom, and that's it. And it'll go through and it'll find all the images and it'll just add the class, or it'll reformat and process the images and cache them for you, but it will then add that class to all the tags, and then you get that output. It's really straightforward, really easy, and it's another of these ones that's designed just to work. So you haven't got to think about it. You just bracket your block of text that might contain images, and it does it. And no images there, it doesn't do anything at all. If it finds an image, it processes it as though you'd put a JCOGS image tag around that image in the rich text field. If that,
nice.
Hopefully that makes sense. I don't know.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah.
I posted the link to the docs for the bulk image thing in the chat there for everybody too.
Thank you.
So be sure to check that out.
Yeah.
Hopefully these are a little quicker questions here. So XLG ask again, the default setting for JCOGS for sharpen is 10. Is there a reason why?
Not really. Yeah, not really. It just is.
Right. No, that's a fine answer. Say, because I'm the developer and I made it 10. No, I think the underlying is like, is there something about sharpening that's like the perfect level or something like that? So.
No, there is probably, yeah. There's a long discussion about sharpening and sharpening models and stuff.
Yes.
Which we better not go into, but so no, it's just a number, and the bigger the number, the more aggressive the sharpening applied is. But pick something, and you can change it if you want to. Put it something else, have something else. That's fine. There isn't a default setting for that, but maybe if that's the question, there's no reason why there couldn't be a default setting for default sharpness. But just 10.
Sure.
Yeah, whatever.
And I think you're pretty open to people reaching out to you for feature requests or ideas or thoughts or anything like that. So,
yeah, absolutely.
If you guys have any updates or things you'd like to see, feel free to reach out to Gavin. He's on Slack very often. Again, JCOGS image on Slack, or JCOGS on Slack.
Yeah.
And all right. And our final question here from Mike. Okay. Mike asks, I experienced an issue with generated WebP where it was given a black background. or one was displayed on Safari. I can't remember the exact details. Does this plugin address that? Is that what you were talking about originally with WebP, unless you set transparent or something like that?
No, well, sort of.
Okay.
Some versions of Safari don't support WebP. And
Okay.
if you load an image in some versions of Safari, then you get unpredictable results depending on what the WebP configuration is, and some I think you get no results at all. So that it's most likely, if it's Safari, it's most likely just that it's a version of Safari that doesn't tolerate WebP very kindly, and that's addressed by the browser sniffing that image does. So image, literally, when you process an image, it will try and talk to the browser that's making the request, and it'll ask what image formats it tolerates. And if it tolerates WebP and you've asked for the image to be WebP, it'll send WebP. If you've asked for WebP and the browser says I don't understand WebP, it'll substitute another format, usually JPEG, unless it's got transparency, in which case it will try and do PNG if it can, and send that to the browser instead. So if you're using image and you are not using a static cache, then you shouldn't have those problems. And if you do, let me know. But it should fix those problems on the fly for you. So again, it's not that you have to do anything about it. It just works and it doesn't cause problems. Yeah, and that's what that's all about. Yeah, it's simple, straightforward. Yeah,
Awesome.
Just can I use, or whatever the phrase is, just keep track of what can I use stuff.
Yeah.
But at the moment, it's not completely good for WebP.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate your patience through all those questions and the great answers, very detailed answers. And that's all the questions we have for today.
Okay.
So Gavin, greatly appreciate you being here. Greatly. I know it's not easy coming on here and talking to the void when you're just talking to the screen here, but fantastic.
Yeah.
Sorry again about the technical difficulties.
I don't know what they are, but I apologize for the fact that I didn't see what was going on for a while. So but anyway, hopefully some of it made sense and it was useful to you. But anyway, good stuff.
Yeah, and definitely thank you for your contributions to the community and just being a part of the community and everything you add to it. Can't thank you enough for that. And I think others have definitely been influenced by you or have definitely used your advice that you've given out. So thank you again for that.
Yeah,
so,
it's mutual. I learn a lot from the community too. So
awesome.
It's a good thing generally. But
that's how it should be.
Yeah, so. That's what communities are.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, good.
All right. I'll
Thank
let you hop off. I have been given, since Tom is not feeling well today, I've been asked to give a quick update from the community or from the EE team on Expression Engine related matters. So the main news coming out is 6.2 should be released either tomorrow, hopefully tomorrow. I don't think, looking at Slack messages coming through, I think that's the current intended time frame. We finished up testing and just wrapping everything up, and that should be ready to go tomorrow. If you are ever interested in what is happening with Expression Engine and coming versions, I'm going to send you everybody this link here. And so that's the link to the public repository. But what we do on the team is we use the milestones in GitHub. So if you ever go to pull request and you click on milestones, you'll see different versions. And so right now I don't know if we have anything for 6.3 yet. We don't have anything for 6.3 ready to PR yet, or at least that's not closed. We have 6 open. So you can even see, if you want to look at what's going to be PR'd into 6.3, that's going to be in there. The link I just sent is for 6.2, which is what was just wrapped up. And so you can see all the closed PRs. And even if you don't like to go line by line through code, you can see the names of some of those pull requests and get an idea of what's happening and what's going to be added. Those come across in the GitHub Slack channel. So if you're in the Slack community, you can see that there as well. Or you can visit this anytime and just keep track of what's happening and what we're planning to put into the next version of EE. So a few main things coming up. if you are an Expression Engine Pro user, we're adding multi-factor authentication, sometimes known as 2FA. This is MFA, multi-factor authentication. So that's going to be built in with Expression Engine Pro. We're really excited about using that. You'll be able to scan your QR code with Authy or Google Authenticator, 1Password, whatever MFA tool you use, and be able to allow your users to use that as well. We've cleaned up some UI issues. The CLI has also been updated. I know I've had several conversations with developers who are excited about the CLI and where it's going. So we've fixed a couple bugs with that. We added a model generator to where now you can generate EE models from the CLI. There's been some performance enhancements. So again, you can see those in the pull requests. We've updated password security updates. So this is one to be aware of, where we've added 4 different levels of password security strictness. Anywhere from no requirements to where anybody can use any password to all having, forcing very complex passwords. And there's actually going to be there's an algorithm that's tied to the UI that'll have a password meter and allow your users to see how secure their password is. By default now, when you install a fresh install of Expression Engine, it's going to require what we call a basic level, which it means that people are going to have, I believe, capital letters and numbers in combination with the minimum length, just to install Expression Engine. Expression Engine has always prided itself on being a very secure CMS, and we thought it was time to move up our password requirements and ability to manage that more into modern standards. And so we're excited about that rolling out. Again, some bug fixes. We've added some sticky columns to the entries manager. So excited to see that roll out. Let's see. A big one that I know people are excited about: entry ID and URL title is now searchable in the control panel. So you should be able to go to the entry manager and put in an entry ID and get your results from that. So that's something I know that a lot of people have asked for many times. So I'm excited about that myself. And then again, just some security and bug fixes, that kind of stuff. So again, look for that. Pay attention to Slack or the EECMS Twitter account, GitHub, the blog, all those places, and watch for that release coming out. We did end of life 5.4 in December. So just letting everybody know that we released our last update for Expression Engine 5. It's served the community well, and now it's time to move on. We're now in 6.2, and the update to version 6 from any previous versions from 2 forward has been pretty seamless. It's all according to what third-party add-ons you have installed, but most of the reports have gone very well with that. So we really encourage everyone to upgrade to version 6. And so we've gone ahead and end of life 5, and it's time to move up in the world. So we're excited about that. We're excited about where 6 is going. We're excited about supporting that. And Tom just pinged me that I do want to mention 6.2 with those security updates. It is marked as a critical update. So there's just some items in there that we consider critical, which we really, really strongly encourage you to update to 6.2 when that's released, as soon as you can put a plan around upgrading. All right, as always, the EU team is available. Ping us on Slack, mention us in Twitter, all those kind of places, and we're happy to talk about what's coming up with Expression Engine, where we're going. I'm excited about this coming year. We've been kind of the custodians for I guess a couple years now of Expression Engine, and feel that it's gotten a solid foundation under it with 6 and where we've taken it and where the community's taken it. And so this year is going to be an awesome year that now we can kind of get over a lot of humps that we're I hate to use the word issues, items, feature requests, those kind of things that people have requested for a long time that we've tried to take care of. And now look at where is Expression Engine going in the next few years, and what does the community want it to be? So we're really excited about where it's headed, and want you guys to be a part of that journey as well. Expression Engine is open source. It is a community project. So look for ways to contribute. Look, if you don't know how to get started, we're happy to help you. You can ping me on Slack. You can ping Tom, anybody else, and we'll be happy to get you started on that, on how to contribute to the project, how to open a pull request, how to contribute to docs even, or anything like that. All that stuff is very helpful to the community, and you can also contribute through Expression Engine university articles, be a speaker at a conference. Just saying. So, all right. So closing ceremonies here, and I will let you guys go. All right. So of course, thanks everyone. Thanks for joining. Thanks for taking time out of your morning. We went right up to the 12:30 mark today, and just appreciate you guys taking the time to be a part of this community and all that you guys do for us. Again, JCOGS Image is Gavin's add-on. Be sure to give him some love, throw him some money, all that kind of stuff. Go buy it. Go buy mini versions for all your sites. Upgrade from CE Image or whatever else you might be using, or none if you were like me previously, probably. So as you saw today, it's a great add-on, very helpful for you and your users, and done by a great developer. So definitely want to support him. I just want to run through our sponsors again, our gold sponsors and our silver sponsors and our bronze sponsors, who everybody works together to make this happen. Couldn't do this without you guys, our friends of EE. If you're interested in sponsorship, let us know. I can send you a sponsorship package. Sponsorships go for the entire year. So you get not only mentioned at these meetups, the spring summit, the fall summit, all of our campaigns throughout the year, you'll get mentions on. So it's not just for a single event. And again, I just want to remind everybody, go now, eeconference.com, click on buy early bird tickets, and you can go ahead and get your tickets for Philadelphia 2022. We're excited about that. So thank you guys, everybody. We're going to go ahead and end the event now. Hope everyone has a great day, a great January. Our next event will be in March. And so look for communication about that. If you have ideas for what you want to hear about at meetups, if you have ideas about what you want to hear about at our conferences, anything like that, let us know. Ping us in Slack, Twitter, email, wherever that might be. And we greatly appreciate all contributions from the community. All right, guys, have a good day.